you look like you're as settled as you're going to be. So let's start. So welcome to day 2, session 2, and thank you to Sadhaloka for leading session 1. So we have Patrick on tech again at Adhisthana, keeping the whole thing rolling along. And again, as you can probably hear in the background, I've got a Vijayamala who's doing things at this end. So yesterday we started into the 7-point mind training, and we recapped some of the first 2 points. So we looked at first training the preliminaries briefly, and then we went on to the main practice. And in what in my European time was the afternoon session, we looked a little bit at Tonglen, and you've got those Tonglen pointers if you need a bit of support with practicing. And then in the last session yesterday, we looked at some of the ultimate bodhicitta. So we looked at think of things as dreamlike, examine the nature of unborn awareness, and let even the antidote liberate itself. And today we're going to carry on into the rest of the ultimate bodhicitta. And the next sort of day or so, they're probably all going to be a bit ultimate, really, because very often when I lead something on the 7-point mind training, I spread the pieces of advice about wisdom and the ultimate over several days. Very often we do one each morning, something like that. But I think it's not going to work very well to do it like that. I think it makes more sense we just go through the text, filling in the gaps that we didn't do in the first retreat. So yeah, it means that we're going to be not just wisdom oriented, but very hopefully very relaxation oriented, very letting go oriented over the next day or so. So can't be bad, and we'll make sure we keep our hearts open. So I think to do that, I know you're all sat there with your notebooks and so on, but I think to make sure our hearts are really open before we go any further, we're going to meditate. So I'll give you a minute or two to resettle yourself. So yesterday in meditation, we attuned ourselves to a great stream of wisdom and compassion that had come down from the Buddha through Mahayana, Bodhicitta, Atisha, Geshe Chekawa, down to Bhante and his teachers. We opened out, we attuned to one another. In the afternoon, my time, we did Tonglen for ourselves. And in the last session, we explored a bit the dreamlike nature of things, particularly how things Now, all these things that we get caught up with, feeling so important at the time, vanish like dreams. So as usual now, let's just start relaxing, nothing to do. Just experience as it is. Now taking awareness and energy downwards, feeling or imagining awareness and energy going down into the earth. Like putting down roots. And just as a tree's roots enable it to be nourished by the earth, so we can be nourished by the earth's qualities. That stability, that strength, that support. We can always return to this experience during meditation. We need to relax more. We're being thrown around emotionally. And stability of the earth is always available. This support is always available. And out of this firm basis, you let the body rise up like some great tree. Now bringing awareness into the body. A kindly awareness. Open to whatever's happening. Now focusing on the breathing. Now, as we did yesterday, tuning into that whole stream of wisdom and great compassion that comes from the Buddha, his early disciples who wandered for the welfare of the world, to the Mahayana teachers who made explicit Bodhisattva ideal of gaining awakening for the sake of all beings. People like Shantideva. And then Atisha, who carried these teachings to Tibet. And his followers and disciples, Geshe Chekawa, who shared this 7-point mind training which was so effective, it was taken up by all the different Tibetan schools, practiced and shared down through the centuries, right down to people like Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, Dado Rinpoche, to Bante. So with each in-breath, drawing on the inspiration and the qualities that whole stream of great love, great compassion, great wisdom. With the out-breath, just resting, absorbing, taking the qualities more and more to heart. Now continuing with the in-breath in the same way. And with the out-breath, having a sense of sharing the inspiration, sharing the qualities with all of us meditating together. So we're the recipients of a great sharing. Started with the Buddha sharing his experience. And continued, sharing qualities, sharing teaching. Right down to Bhante and his teachers. Onto us. Now we do our best in meditation to share with one another. Receiving with the in-breath, sharing with the out-breath. Now together, let's share wider and wider. All those on the retreat who aren't participating now in this meditation, all those in the order. Then out and out. All kinds of beings. Imagining, feeling that they all come into contact with great love, great compassion, great wisdom. They take those qualities in and are transformed. And now letting everything rest. Not making any effort to make anything happen or stop anything happening. Okay, I'll just let you change places and do whatever you think it's the time for. So at the end of most of the meditations, we've been transferring merits, because it's recommended in the 7-point mind training, and it's also a good thing to do, just to let go of any kind of holding on to the meditation, and particularly holding on to any sense of, oh, I did this and I did that. But some of the meditations, the whole thing is a sort of sharing of the benefits and the sharing of the merits. So I haven't been doing. All right, so most people that I can see are back with us. We're going to start in now to the fifth of the pieces of advice in this 7-point mind training. So rest in the nature of alaya, the essence. And this follows on from the previous 3. So think of things as dreamlike, examine the nature of unborn awareness, and let even the antidote liberate itself. So we were, we'd think of things as dreamlike, we would seeing the nature of appearances, which encouraged us not to fix them, and therefore not to cling on to them. And then, having done that, we was examine the nature of unborn awareness. So we went deeper, looking at the nature of the awareness in which all these appearances arise and pass away, and looked at the nature of that awareness. And again, saw that there was nothing that we could cling on to, nothing fixed. It was empty, it was ungraspable. And then we let even the antidote liberate itself. So having kind of come to the solution, okay, everything is empty, everything's ungraspable, that's the nature of everything. We grasped onto that. So at that point, we let go even of that sort of that final view, if you like. So where does that leave us? Well, that, if it works, it leaves us resting in the nature of alaya, the essence. Now, I could kind of skate over this, and some of you might prefer it if I did, because it would keep us a little bit more in a sort of meditative mood. But I think it's worth going a little bit into the whole thing about alaya, particularly because quite a number of us will have read one or more kind of commentaries on the 7-point mind training, and you come to this and you may not realize that when they're talking about alaya, different commentaries will be meaning very different things. And if you don't get that, you can get quite confused. So I'm going to unpack it a bit. If I were to fully unpack this, well, the suitcase is more or less bottomless. We can keep on going and going and going. So I'm going to sort of see if I can pick out some main points. Yeah, but it's a few minutes of being a little bit more theoretical. So let's start with where we tend to start. So there's the alaya vijnana, and in general, probably within Sharatna, we have the idea that the alaya vijnana is a view of things which you find in the Yogacara school of Mahayana Buddhism, and that within that there's a scheme of 8 consciousnesses. So there are the 5 outer sense consciousnesses. So there's the eye consciousness, the ear consciousness, and body consciousness, and so on, which enables those senses to function and take and to perceive. And then there's a mind consciousness which perceives thoughts and images and so on. And then there's a 7th consciousness, the Klishna Mano Vijnana, which is defiled, which is interpreting experience, interpreting what is appearing to the other, those 6 senses, and misinterpreting it, particularly in terms of subject and object and a self that is confronted with the world. And then beyond that, there's this 8th consciousness, this alaya vijnana, which is often translated as storehouse consciousness, although it might be better to think of it as a sort of storing consciousness, which is misperceived by that 7th consciousness as a self, and whose function originally seems to have been to explain how, when I act in the present now, the effects come about later. And so it's a way of explaining how the sort of how karmas are. It was part of explaining the whole doctrine of sort of actions and results. So that, I suspect, is kind of a lot of order members' kind of understanding of this. I'm sure all of you have tremendously sophisticated understandings of all this, but there are order members out there who, you know, just kind of got a basic grasp on these things. So let's talk for them. So the one thing to be said about that is that it can be quite a sort of static model. You know, there are these 8 different consciousnesses. You know, originally in the time of the Buddha there were 6, and then Yogacara discovered 2 more. And they can be kind of laid out in a sort of map. Whereas probably what we're talking about is something that's much more dynamic than that. We're talking about processes. So probably originally, one of the difficulties is that the term alaya has changed over the centuries. It changed as Yogacara developed, and then it got used in all kinds of ways in Tibet. So probably to start with, alaya just meant the sum total of samskaras that continued forwards. Yeah, so it's like there's a sort of momentum to our being. Yeah. So if we want to see alaya more dynamically, it would be a bit like the sort of wave of which it's like this moment doesn't arrive just kind of afresh and we could do absolutely anything and absolutely anything could appear. This moment, this kind of little foam moment, is actually kind of riding on a sort of wave which has tremendous kind of kinetic energy, a sort of, you know, dynamic energy, which comes from all the previous ways in which we've put our energy behind particular things, ways in which the directions that we've moved in, all the wave of volitions going back, and who knows how far it goes back. Yeah. So that in this moment, although we have a certain freedom, actually we're not free to totally discard, our past and our past habits. We find that when we try to move in a new direction, if it's really a new direction, it's actually quite hard, because there's this sort of wave of this sort of momentum of how mind has used itself over so long. So there's always energy from the past shaping how we act today, how we act now. And so we talk about alaya vijnana as this storing consciousness. And actually even consciousness isn't a great word, because a lot of what's included in the alaya isn't conscious. You can sort of feel sometimes the sort of the push or the pull of this, if you like, the momentum of this wave that is not a wave, we just experience this moment. So if we think of mind dynamically, then mind is just the totality of all the processes that are going on within it. And it's not like the Yogacaras sort of discovered two new consciousnesses. It was more like they just kind of differentiated. They produced a more subtle model of what mind was like by including the seventh and eighth consciousness. It wasn't that they discovered a sort of deeper level of consciousness than the Buddha ever touched on. So, alaya develops in Indian Buddhism, and then it gets taken over into Tibetan Buddhism. And that's where we encounter it. So you come upon a commentary on the 7-point mind training written by some Gelug Geshe or Geshe Kelsang or some Gelug Rinpoche who's teaching this. And after Buddhism has been in Tibet for a few centuries, there's been some basic disagreement about what alaya means. Some people are associating it with Buddha nature. And some people are interpreting Buddha nature not as a potential for awakening that we all have. They're interpreting it as something which is an entity, effectively, which is eternal. So that causes all sorts of complications within Tibetan Buddhism. I could go into some of the history of it, but I'll spare you. So most Tibetan Buddhists follow the Gelug school founded by Tsongkhapa, and of whom the Dalai Lama is a member. Yeah. And so when you read a Gelug commentary on the 7-point mind training, you come to this one, they will say they won't interpret alaya really even in terms of alaya vijnana, like Yogacara, like, as a sort of storing consciousness. Yeah. Because they will be scared that somehow that will be kind of taken on to mean Buddha nature in some sort of eternalistic way. Yeah. So they will stick to saying alaya in Tibetan is translated as kunshi, which means the basis of all, the foundation of all, the ground of all. So they will say, well, what is the ground of all? Well, the ground of all experience is emptiness. It's what makes all appearances possible is that there's no core, there's no substance to them. They're all ungraspable. Yeah. So they will say what this is about is meditating on emptiness, meditating on the ungraspable nature of things, meditating on the fact that nothing has any substantial existence, nothing exists from its own side, as they will talk about it. So whether that's a person or a tree or whatever you like, any phenomenon whatsoever. So if you read a Gelug commentary, then what you do at this point is you meditate on how everything is empty of any substantial core nature, and you build up shamatha on that. So your meditation, you take whatever understanding you have of emptiness of inherent nature, and you meditate and meditate, building up more and more absorption around that until you have a direct intuitive knowing of it. Yeah. And that's the practice. So then it gets kind of confusing where you later pick up a commentary by some Kagyu or Nyingma Lama who talks about something completely different. It's even more confusing if you don't quite notice and you somehow feel they ought to mean the same thing because they're both talking about this alaya thing. So let's take in say the Kagyu school, you will then, when you get into Kagyu, you will have some people who will be interpreting alaya as Buddha nature as something which is kind of eternal and existent, and you'll have other people who will be interpreting it as the deepest level of mind, but still empty, still ungraspable. They're not asserting anything. So if you read a Kagyu commentary, for instance, what they'll say is, okay, so we went from exploring phenomena to looking at the nature of mind, to looking at seeing that any concept that you like is empty. We've let even the antidote liberate itself. So now what we do is we don't focus on an idea of emptiness of inherent existence and meditate on that. We just relax completely. We just let go and we let awareness open and relax, because now it's not being confused by concepts. We're not getting caught up in perceptions because we're seeing them as dreamlike. So we're not holding on to the perceptions. We're not holding on to an idea of mind and self and identified with that. We're not even holding on to some idea about emptiness, letting go. And so there's an opportunity, or out of that naturally comes a deep sort of resting. Yeah. It's like all the identification, all the grasping has been explored and is being released. And so then when that happens, mind relaxes very, very deeply. And that experience, the experience that we have when mind relaxes very deeply, when there's a deep letting go, is mind experiencing its own nature, which is this basis of all, which is translation of alaya. So you see, there are two very different approaches that you get. If you read this Gelug commentary, then here you're meditating on a concept until you penetrate it. If you follow, say, a Kagyu commentary, then it's all about letting go of identification, letting go of attachment, relaxing more and more and more, and experiencing through that an awareness which has finally even relaxed out of creating a sense of a self in relation to a world. Okay. I think we might need a cup of something after that. So let's have a break. Let's have a break until the 1:15. Yeah. If you want to put questions in the chat, you're very welcome, just to give me an idea of what you did or didn't understand. That might help me where we go from here. But yeah, let's come back at the 1:15. Can you find me on the screen? Yeah. Okay. Still beings arriving back from all directions, flying in. Sadhavantri has turned into Padmasambhava. Another splendid rupa. So before the break, we were in deep water, in the waters of the alaya, or the great wave of the alaya. And I mentioned if you had questions, you could put them in the chat. So you have. And, I'll see if I can go through some of them. So you remember I was saying, well, you know, alaya was a term whose meaning developed over centuries in Indian Buddhism, and then it got taken into Tibet and interpreted in different ways. And particularly Gelug teachers have one way of teaching, and Kagyu and Nyingma will have another way of teaching and explaining this piece of advice in the 7-point mind training. And of course, it's not just the Tibetans, it's their Western students as well. So if you read a commentary by a Western teacher, they will have been taught one or another of these views. All right, so let's start in. So I'm just going to go through the chat and see if I can say a quick few, as quick as I ever manage, a few things about the questions. So the Kagyu approach is presumably Mahamudra. Yes, it is. While we're sorting out confusion, Gelug also talk about Mahamudra, but by that, they talk about Mahamudra meditation sometimes in the Gelug school. By that, they mean focusing on the absence of inherent existence of things. That's all they mean by it. They don't mean sort of exploring beyond that. They're just so you can be confused finding the same term and discovering that it means one thing in Gelug and another in Kagyu. So the Kagyu approach, is Mahamudra. Mahamudra is a term for, amongst other things, it's a term for the deepest level of experience, where mind is completely relaxed, there's no creation of a self and another split at all. And just to make it clear, so some Kagyu teachers will be teaching about alaya and Buddha nature as if there was something, there was something real and more like an entity, something that's kind of eternally existent. And then a lot of them won't be. They won't be teaching it in that way. They'll be teaching it as a potential, as an experience, as awakened experience, but they're not creating any kind of entity out of it. So you need to be aware to some extent, what view they're teaching. Okay, can you recommend further reading, please? I always hate this question because it depends who you are. I mean, I find it very difficult to recommend something because most of the texts they either really simplify things and say, well, this is how it is, you know, they just assert the view of their school, or it just gets very, very, very complicated and often very, very scholastic. I mean, there's a fantastic Western scholar called Karl Brunhölzl, who goes very deeply into all this, but I mean, his books are that thick, you know, and you have a footnote which lasts a page and a half. I mean, it's great, but you know, you have to have a really particular sort of mind. So, you know, if I recommended one of his books to a lot of you, you know, you'd kind of use it as a doorstop or something, it'd be useful for that, but your chances of ever getting through it would be kind of nil. And most of us don't need that sort of complexity, but some of us it will really help. So I find it really difficult recommending things. I can't think of a nice book which just gives you a clear, simple summary. Maybe one day we'll have to produce one. Not a book, at least something short. Very helpful. Are you saying that the out of Gelug and Kargu, one is more a self-discovery myth and the other more an emergence myth? I would say in general, Gelug is more of a development view of things, and Kargu is more of discovery, which includes emergence. A lot of Gelug sort of teaching is designed to kind of avoid getting into things about, you know, something real there to be discovered. Could you give me a link to a text on this? Refer you to my answer above. Thanks. My question is, do the two approaches you described lead to essentially the same place? Yes, they do, provided that you don't hold on anywhere to, provided you get to the emptiness of emptiness. And you know, we need to get beyond a conceptual view of things into direct experience. Yeah, so whichever, yeah, you can certainly meditate on the empty nature of things and go deeper and deeper into that. And provided you take it far enough, that will take you to the same place as if you just relax and relax and relax. And let go of identification, let go of attachment. They'll bring you to the same place. I understand we're a wave, and right now we're just a piece of foam. Very light, aren't we? Just a piece of foam. I understand if we relax and relax, we can find understanding. Yes, sort of relaxing with awareness of what's going on. Or we can meditate on the concept and break through it that way. Okay. But is the concept Buddha nature, and is that Buddha nature emptiness? So if we meditate on a concept and break through it that way, the Gelug teachers would tell you to meditate on emptiness, the emptiness of inherent existence of things, that nothing has any cause, so which means everything is flow, everything's transformation. They would say that they don't talk about that in terms of Buddha nature usually. Yeah, they're very wary of the term Buddha nature, because the term Buddha nature is what's used by some teachers in other schools to mean something sort of, you know, something truly existent which you can discover, yeah, when you clear away the adventitious defilements. So they wouldn't be thinking in terms of meditating on Buddha nature. When we relax enough, do we just see into the nature of experience as empty? Yes, you do. You may not do it in a very sort of philosophical, you know, it's not like you you relax into the nature of mind, and suddenly you think, ah, everything is empty of inherent existence, because you've left all those concepts behind. But your experience, when you relax, when mind becomes deeply relaxed, is of everything flowing. There's no all the fixity created by concepts, particularly the fixity of self and other, me and it, all that goes. So in that sense, there's an experience of the empty quality of things. Okay, can you take me down some more, Rajama? Where does Shenpen Hukum's approach fit into this? Well, Shenpen Hukum, she wrote a book, well, firstly a doctoral thesis and then a book on Buddha nature called The Buddha Within. And I think it's fair to say that in her teaching, she approaches things following a teacher, a 13th century teacher called Dolpo Pa. And Dolpo Pa was the teacher in Tibetan Buddhism who really put the cat amongst the pigeons, as we say in English, by asserting that there was, when you cleared away the adventitious defilements, what you discovered was a Buddha nature which was truly existent. So Dolpo Pa is really he would say that he was drawing out earlier teachings, but certainly in terms of explicit teaching, he's the source of that idea of Buddha nature as something eternally existent. And so she, following him, that would be, if you go into her view of things, I think it would be fair to say that, which is why Bante ended up having quite a number of conversations with her, because he felt that that view of Buddha nature wasn't helpful, that it was departing from the sort of overall Buddhist approach, which is that everything is flow. There are no eternal existence. There are no entities when you really explore things. Okay, that's a sort of short answer to that. Thank you, Sandra. Which approach do you recommend? Well, I think it's useful to have some. It's useful, firstly, to recognize that all these views are views, and all these different approaches are, like the whole of the Dharma, they're remedies and antidotes. So if you really get that, then you can then move between different approaches to practice as appropriate, and that's helpful. I think it's helpful to have some understanding of the fact that there's no inherent existence to anything. I don't recommend going very far into the Golok approach, because it gets very often very scholastic. It's quite academic, and I think most of us don't need that. We need to get free of suffering. We need to be liberated, and they inherited hundreds of years of discussion in Indian monastic universities and so on, and then carried them on into Tibet. So we don't need all that. But some basic understanding of the emptiness of inherent existence is great. And I think in practice, the approach of that Kagyu approach of relaxing, letting go, becomes a very deep way of practicing just sitting, which I think is really helpful. And although poetically, I think poetically it can be helpful to have a sense that yeah, you know, there's inner riches which we can discover. Yeah, there's so that it's not just that we kind of cut away. We need to be encouraged to have a sense that as mind relaxes, positive qualities arise. Yeah, that's what's important. I don't recommend fixing that into some kind of sense of a really existent Buddha nature. I think that's holding on to something else, and it goes against the grain of the Buddha's teaching and Bante's teaching. So I think there's a sort of practical level where yeah, we need to be encouraged that when we let go of selfing, something really good will happen, and that when mind relaxes, positive qualities begin to blossom, but without giving that some kind of philosophical underpinning that's unnecessary and unhelpful. Did you go into the Nyingma view of it, Vasantara? No, I didn't go very far into the Nyingma view of it because I don't feel qualified to go very far into it. But they also talk in terms of the Ji and Kunji, and yes, so, and they very much have a Nyingma teacher would also interpret the practice for this piece of advice as being relaxing, letting go of identification, letting go of being attached to anything. They would very much go that way. Kagyu and Nyingma tend to be quite close, but there are subtle differences, and I don't feel I understand the Nyingma side of it enough to give a full account of it, so I didn't really go there very much. Is alaya in this context the same as the ground? In this context, yes. So alaya started meaning something in Indian Yogacara, but then in Tibet, it became translated as this kunji, as the ground, the all ground. So yes. Sounds like there's need for you to write a nice, clear, simple summary. I'll think about that. Well, maybe you could write a clear, simple version. Oh no. Yes. What does ground of being mean? Is this interchangeable with alaya? I think it would take too long to sort of really unpack all that, so I'm going to regretfully leave that one. Please forgive me, Sindhidakini. I might come back to it. How does Bante's version of relative and absolute alaya relate to this? Yeah, I'm going to come back to that one as well, because I'd like us to meditate for a few minutes before the end of the session. I'm thinking of Yama turning the wheel in this, just flux and shifting form. Okay. Am I at the, oh, I've got another one on an iPad. Two questions. I'll read them out and maybe we'll deal with them later. Two questions regarding the rest and the nature of alaya, the essence. One, is that instruction similar or different? So there's this instruction, rest in the nature of alaya. Is that instruction similar or different to indications such as the groundless ground or the stream of consciousness? Two, in Khenpo Sutren Gamso Rinpoche's progressive stages of meditation on emptiness, he's a Tibetan teacher who's the these days is the main teacher of Lama Shenpen Hukam. He distinguishes between Majjhimaka, Rangtong, and Shentong. Is this the same or similar distinction you're making between the Gelug and Kagyu approaches to this absolute bodhicitta point in the 7-point mind training? Yes, it's a similar distinction, but maybe we'll come back to it, and maybe we're getting into deeper water than most of us need to go into. All right. Well, that was fun, wasn't it? Let's finish the morning. I'll set on one side those questions that I didn't get to, and see if I can answer them somewhere along the line. But let's meditate for a few minutes. So once again, resting just as we are. Aware of experience as it is. So allowing ourselves to settle into experience. See if we can allow ourselves to just be at home in this present moment. aware of the support of the earth. Entrusting ourselves to it, relaxing, giving it our weight. Letting our posture, as much as possible, support a relaxed awareness. Bring that relaxed awareness into the body. The kindly awareness, all the movements of energy, the sensations. It's a kindly relaxed awareness. So we're not caught up. Not making anything that's happening part of some sort of story of me and what it means to me. As much as possible, relaxed and easy. Allowing sensations to naturally unfold. And in the same way, relaxed in relation to the other, what we call outer senses. Registering sounds, tastes, and so on. Not putting energy into those senses, not engaging with the experiences. Letting everything flow. And similarly with thoughts, with words and images, associated feelings. Relaxed in relation to them. No need to identify. No need to put any energy into them. No need to block them. Just relax, letting them come and go as they will. Whatever an experience gives us a sense of I and me. Any emotions connected with that? Relaxed in relation to all that. Letting everything come and go. No need to be identified. Just deep resting in experience. Just awareness resting in itself. And when we're ready, be very gentle. Seeing how relaxed we can stay. As we start to engage more energy with the outer senses. Sharing the merits with all beings, where they all find deep relaxation of mind. Beyond all ego clinging. Okay, thank you for that. And yeah, if you have questions either about what we were talking about or about the practice, feel free to send them along. I'll do my best to answer them, or at least anything like that. It all helps get a sense of where the teaching might need to go. So, yeah. Right, have a very good time for the next few hours and hope to see you on the next session.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks, Vasantra.
Thank you, Vasantra.
Welcome.
Bye.
Thanks, Vasantra.
Pleasure.
Thank you.